My name is Sofía, and I am 26 years old. I live in a small Andalusian village, a place where the sun seems to paint the houses white and time stretches out like a summer siesta. Since I was a child, my life has been marked by a particular silence, one that resonated louder than any words. My adoptive parents, Carmen and Antonio, were people of deep-rooted customs, lovers of order and tradition. Their love for me, though present, always felt conditioned by a tacit expectation. An expectation that I, with my untamed hair and my dreamy spirit, never quite managed to fulfill. I remember their gazes, more than their words, when my curly mane refused to be tamed. It was hair of an intense reddish, almost copper color, which contrasted with their smooth, dark hair. Hair that, for them, was a constant reminder of my unknown origin, of what didn't fit. From a very young age, they tried to tame my curls with combs, hair ties, and pins, always with the same frustration. "Sofía, you look like a scarecrow," Carmen would say with a sigh, while Antonio nodded, his brow furrowed. Their comments were not shouts, but whispers laden with disappointment. Those words, though supposedly said with the intention of helping me, pierced my soul like small needles. They made me feel that there was something fundamentally wrong with me, something that needed to be corrected to be worthy of their affection. I would look in the mirror and only see a problem. The house, with its whitewashed walls and geraniums on the balconies, often felt like a gilded cage, a place where love came with the condition of molding me in their image and likeness. I longed to be myself, but the fear of their disapproval was a constant shadow. As I grew older, the mockery about my hairstyle became an almost daily ritual, a subtle form of control. Every morning, in front of the mirror, the battle would begin anew. They would try to straighten, I would feel my identity shrink. It wasn't just the hair, it was everything it represented. My hair was wild, free, different, and they wanted it to be docile, predictable, the same. It was a silent struggle for my very essence, one that I, as a child, didn't know how to fight. I felt like a wildflower transplanted into a formal garden where it was expected to grow straight and orderly. But my roots, invisible to them, pulled in another direction. I wanted to bloom in my own way, with my own petals and my own colors. The village was small, and my parents' opinions carried weight. People would look at me with curiosity, and sometimes I would overhear comments about my peculiar hair. I felt exposed, as if my difference were a public spectacle. I often wondered where this hair came from, this part of me that bothered them so much. It was my only tangible link to my past, a mystery that accompanied me day and night. A mystery they didn't want to unravel. Melancholy settled in my heart from an early age. I took refuge in books, in the quiet corners of the orchard, seeking an escape. I imagined worlds where beauty was not measured by conformity, but by uniqueness. My curls became a symbol of my inner resistance, though at the time I didn't fully understand it. They were a part of me that they couldn't change, no matter how hard they tried. A small flag of my individuality. Sometimes, I would style my hair in a way that tried to please them, but the discomfort was palpable. It wasn't me. Every strand of my hair felt like a silent protest, a muffled cry for freedom. That constant mockery, that veiled disapproval, forged something within me. It wasn't weakness, but a quiet strength, a determination that had not yet found its voice. A strength that, one day, would allow me to fly. My childhood years passed under the shadow of Carmen and Antonio's expectations. They wanted a daughter who reflected their image, who seamlessly integrated into the social fabric of the village. My hair was the first visible obstacle. Every Sunday, before going to Mass, the ritual would repeat. Carmen would sit me on a chair, and with a fine-toothed comb, she would try to straighten my curls. Her gestures were firm, almost impatient, as I felt her tugging at my scalp. "Like this, Sofía. This is how a young lady should look," she would murmur, as I pressed my lips together to avoid complaining. The mirror reflected an image I didn't recognize, a girl with tight hair and an expression of resignation. Antonio, for his part, used to make more direct comments. "That hair of yours is a bird's nest," he would say with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes, but stayed as a grimace. His mockery was public, sometimes even in front of neighbors. I felt humiliated, exposed, as if my hair were a moral defect, something to be ashamed of. I wished I could disappear, merge with the white walls of the house, and be invisible to everyone. At school, my classmates quickly noticed my difference. The boys called me the crazy-haired one, and the girls looked at me with a mix of curiosity and pity. I felt alone, despite being surrounded by people. I tried to hide my hair under hats or scarves, but my curls always found a way to escape. It was as if they had a life of their own, a will that I myself couldn't control. And that, to my parents, was exasperating. Conversations at home often revolved around the need for me to look more presentable. They didn't talk about my grades, my drawings, or my dreams, only about my appearance, and in particular my hair. I began to associate my hair with rejection, with the idea that I would never be enough. I wanted to please them. I wanted their unconditional approval, but every attempt to change myself only pushed me further away from who I was. The melancholy deepened. I spent hours drawing in my notebook, creating characters with extravagant, free hair, like the ones I dreamed of having. It was my small act of rebellion, my way of escaping. My parents didn't understand my inner world. For them, life was a straight, predictable path, and any deviation was a mistake. My hair, with its curves and volume, was the embodiment of that deviation. Sometimes, I imagined my biological parents. Would they also have curly hair? Would they have accepted me as I was? These unanswered questions fueled my longing for belonging, for a place where I wouldn't have to hide. The mockery, though not violent, was a form of emotional violence. It eroded my self-esteem, made me doubt my own worth. It taught me to live with a layer of sadness, an armor to protect myself from their words. However, deep within me, a small spark of resistance began to ignite. A silent voice told me that my hair was beautiful, that my difference was a strength, not a weakness. That spark was my secret, my refuge. It was the promise that one day I would find my own path, far from the shadows of others' expectations. A path where my hair and I would be free. As the years passed, my relationship with my adoptive parents became more distant, more formal. The mockery about my hair had become institutionalized, just another part of the family routine. I, for my part, found a secret refuge. It was my paternal grandmother's old studio, a woman who had been an artist and who had passed away long before I came to the family. My parents kept it closed, full of dust and memories they didn't want to touch. One day, driven by curiosity, I found the key hidden under a flower pot. As I opened the door, a smell of oil paint and old wood enveloped me, an aroma of freedom. It was a space full of light, with a covered easel and stacked canvases. There, in that forgotten sanctuary, I began to draw and paint. My first strokes were clumsy, but I felt a deep connection to that place, to the creative energy that still resided within its walls. It was my escape. My hair, which at home was a source of shame, felt free here. I would untie the tight braids Carmen made for me, and my curls would expand, breathing. I felt more like myself in that studio than anywhere else. I began to draw self-portraits, exploring every curl, every imperfection that my parents criticized. On paper, my hair became a work of art, a cascade of curves and shadows that celebrated my uniqueness. No one at home knew about my refuge. It was my most precious secret, a place where I could be Sofía unfiltered, without judgment. There, my melancholy transformed into a productive stillness, into a search for beauty. I found my grandmother's old art books, with illustrations of women with wild and beautiful hair. They inspired me, made me feel that I wasn't alone in my difference. There was beauty in what they saw as a defect. The studio became my school, my therapist. Every brushstroke was a way to process the pain, to transform mockery into expression. My art was my voice, my way of screaming without making a sound. My parents remained oblivious to my inner world. They saw a quiet, obedient Sofía who tried to go unnoticed. They didn't know that, behind their backs, an artist was blooming, a silent rebel. Sometimes, I wondered if my grandmother had also had hair like mine. There was a photo of her as a young woman with a tight bun, but her eyes had a spark of rebellion that reminded me of myself. Art gave me a new perspective. It helped me understand that beauty was not uniform, that uniqueness was a gift. It empowered me to see my hair not as a curse, but as a blessing. Every time I left the studio, I felt renewed, stronger. My parents' mockery was still there, but its impact was lessened. I had a sanctuary, a place where my spirit could fly freely. My hair, in that studio, became my muse, my inspiration. It was living proof that beauty could be found in the unexpected, in what defied norms. It was my crown, not my cross. This secret refuge was the foundation of my strength. It was there that I learned to love myself, to value my difference. It was the place where the seed of my true identity began to germinate, silently. The day that changed everything arrived with spring. It was the day of the Holy Week procession in the village, a solemn and traditional event. My parents had insisted that my appearance be impeccable, up to the occasion. Carmen had spent hours trying to straighten my hair, using pins and hairspray in a desperate attempt. My curls, however, rebelled with the humidity in the air, forming a halo around my head. "It's useless, Carmen. She looks like a witch," Antonio exclaimed, seeing me come out of my room. His voice was louder than usual, laden with frustration and shame. My neighbors, passing by on the street, could hear him. Antonio's laughter echoed in the courtyard, a harsh, contemptuous laugh that chilled my blood. Carmen, with a sigh of defeat, just shook her head, her gaze full of reproach. I felt like a broken object. That public mockery, that open scorn, was the turning point. It wasn't just the hair, it was my dignity, my entire being that they were trampling on. I felt a sharp pain, but also a strange clarity. In that instant, something broke inside me, but not in the way they expected. I didn't shrink, I didn't cry. Instead, a cold fury and an unbreakable determination began to brew within me. I looked Antonio in the eyes, and for the first time, I didn't see my father but a stranger, a man who mocked the essence of his own daughter. And in that moment, his opinion ceased to matter to me. I turned around, without saying a word, and locked myself in my room. I didn't go to the procession. Instead, I sat in front of my mirror, and for the first time, I saw my hair with different eyes. I saw the strength in every curl, the rebellion in every strand. I saw the beauty in its imperfection, in its uniqueness. It was my hair, and it was beautiful. It was a part of me that I would not allow anyone else to define. I took some sewing scissors from my drawer, the ones Carmen used for patterns. With trembling hands, but with growing determination, I began to cut. Not to please them, but to free myself. I cut the damaged ends, the strands that had been subjected to so much torture. I didn't seek a perfect hairstyle, but one that allowed me to feel free, authentic. Each cut was a declaration. When I finished, my hair was shorter, lighter, and my curls looked more defined, more vibrant. I felt a wave of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from me. It was my act of emancipation. That day, my parents' mockery didn't make me smaller. It made me bigger. It made me understand that my strength didn't depend on their approval, but on my own self-acceptance. It was my awakening. My parents' response, that cruel laugh, was the catalyst. It pushed me to find my own voice, to embrace my own truth. It showed me that true strength comes from within, from authenticity. From that day on, my hair was not just hair. It was a symbol of my resistance, of my rebirth. It was the constant reminder that, even in darkness, the light of self-acceptance can shine. After that crucial day, the atmosphere at home became tenser, but also, strangely, more liberating for me. My parents noticed my change, not only in my hair, but in my attitude. My new haircut was a silent challenge. My curls, now shorter and more defined, refused to be hidden. Carmen and Antonio looked at me with a mix of bewilderment and a hint of frustration. They no longer tried to style my hair. Their comments became scarcer, more resigned. It was as if they had understood that my will, for the first time, was stronger than their desire for control. I, for my part, continued to visit my grandmother's studio. My art became bolder, more expressive. I began to paint large canvases, full of color and movement, inspired by nature and freedom. My curls became a recurring theme in my works. I painted them in self-portraits, in abstract figures, in landscapes where the wind played with shapes. It was my way of celebrating what once shamed me. The melancholy did not completely disappear, but it transformed. It was no longer a paralyzing sadness, but a reflective stillness that fueled my creativity. It was the calm before the storm, the peace before the blossoming. I started going out more, exploring the surroundings of the village with new eyes. I discovered hidden paths, corners with breathtaking views. I felt connected to the land, to the wild beauty of Andalusia. My confidence grew with each passing day. I spoke with more assurance. My eyes shone with a new light. I was no longer the shrinking child who hid from gazes, but a woman who was beginning to discover her power. My parents, though they wouldn't admit it, noticed my change. Antonio, sometimes, would observe me from a distance, with an inscrutable expression. Carmen, for her part, maintained her usual reserve. The people of the village also began to look at me differently, some with curiosity, others with admiration. My hair, once a source of mockery, was now a distinctive feature, a mark of my individuality. One day, while painting in the studio, I decided to open the windows wide. Light flooded the room, and the fresh air brought the scent of orange trees. It was a symbolic act of openness, of liberation. I realized that the true transformation was not just external, but internal. It was the process of shedding layers of external expectations, of imposed insecurities, to reveal my true self. My hair, that catalyst for my pain, had become the beacon of my strength. It was a reminder that, sometimes, the greatest wounds are the ones that teach us to fly highest. My parents' mockery, in retrospect, had been a gift in disguise. It had pushed me to the limit, forced me to seek my own truth. It had made me stronger than they ever imagined. This chapter of my life was a silent metamorphosis, one in which the caterpillar, wounded and disparaged, began to weave its own cocoon, preparing to emerge as a butterfly, free and radiant. My silent transformation led me to seek new forms of expression. One day, while walking through the narrow streets of the village, I stumbled upon a small advertisement in the local bakery. They were looking for an artist to paint a mural. It was for the main square, a community project to beautify the center. My heart skipped a beat. It was an opportunity to showcase my art, for my voice, once only whispered in the studio, to resonate throughout the village. I hesitated. The fear of exposure, of criticism, was still present. But the new Sofía, the one who had found her strength, urged me to take the step. I presented myself to the organizing committee, carrying my portfolio of drawings. My curls, now my pride, fell freely over my shoulders as I explained my vision. I wanted to paint the essence of Andalusia, its vibrant colors, its dances, and the strength of its people. The committee, composed of older, respected villagers, listened attentively. At first, their gazes rested on my hair with a curiosity that no longer bothered me. Then, their eyes lit up as they saw my sketches. "You have talent, girl," said Don Manuel, the retired mayor, with a smile. "But are you sure you can handle such a big project?" His question was a challenge, not a doubt. I responded with a firmness that surprised myself. "I'm sure. I will put all my heart into it." I felt that every word was an affirmation of my new identity, of my capability. The next day, the news spread through the village. Sofía, the one with the untamed curls, was going to paint the mural in the square. My parents found out from the neighbors, and their reaction was one of astonishment mixed with disbelief. Antonio looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mix of bewilderment and a hint of respect. Carmen, for her part, only said, "Let's hope you don't mess it up," but her tone lacked the usual mockery. The mural project became my obsession. I spent hours in the square, under the Andalusian sun, mixing colors and bringing my ideas to life. My curls were soaked with sweat, but I felt fulfilled, alive. The people of the village would come closer to observe, to chat. Some offered me water, others told me local stories that inspired my brushstrokes. For the first time, I felt part of the community, not a stranger. My hair, once an object of scorn, was now a topic of conversation. "What beautiful hair," some ladies would say. "It looks like fire," exclaimed the children. It was a radical change in perception. This encounter with the community, through my art, gave me a validation I had never received from my parents. It showed me that my worth did not depend on their approval, but on my own expression. The mural progressed, and with it my confidence. Every brushstroke was an act of liberation, a way of painting my own story on the walls of the village that had once judged me. This project was a turning point. It not only transformed the square, but it transformed me. It gave me a platform to be seen, to be recognized, and to demonstrate that my strength was undeniable. The mural in the main square became my masterpiece. I spent weeks under the Andalusian sun, my curls tied back in a high ponytail, immersed in every detail. The people of the village watched me with growing interest. I painted scenes of local life, women dancing flamenco with passion, men working in the olive groves, children playing in the cobblestone streets. Each figure had a touch of my own soul, of my own story. My curls, which were once a source of shame, were now a subject of admiration. The older ladies of the village would approach and touch them delicately, commenting on their color and vitality. "What beautiful hair, Sofía! It looks like the sun has been trapped in it," an old woman exclaimed one day. Her words, so different from my parents', filled me with an unexpected warmth. On the day of the mural's inauguration, the square was packed. My parents were there, in the front row, with an expression of astonishment they couldn't hide. It was the first time they had seen my art on such a scale. The mayor gave a speech praising my talent and dedication. People applauded, and I felt a wave of emotion. It was the recognition I had always longed for, but had never expected to receive in that way. When people came up to congratulate me, I noticed my parents' gazes. Antonio's eyes were bright, and Carmen, for the first time, gave me a genuine smile, though still tinged with wonder. That night, at home, the silence was different. It was no longer a silence of disapproval, but of respect. My parents didn't say much, but their gestures spoke for themselves. They had seen my strength. The mural not only beautified the square, but also opened doors for me. I received commissions from local businesses, from neighbors who wanted my paintings in their homes. My art, and my hair, became my calling card. I began to sell my works, and for the first time, I had my own money. It was an independence I had never imagined, a freedom that allowed me to make my own decisions, without depending on anyone. My hair, which was once the symbol of my difference and my pain, was now an emblem of my identity, of my success. It was living proof that what makes you unique is often your greatest strength. The melancholy that had accompanied me for years began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of purpose and joy. I had found my place in the world, and I had done it my way. The village's recognition was a balm for my wounds. It taught me that the most important validation does not come from those who criticize you, but from those who see you for who you truly are. My parents, though they never apologized for their mockery, began to treat me with a deference that had not existed before. It was a subtle but significant change. They had seen the strength of my spirit. This chapter was the confirmation that mockery, far from destroying me, had propelled me to build something beautiful. My hair, my art, my story, everything intertwined in a tapestry of overcoming. The success of a square mural was just the beginning. Photos of my work were shared on social media, and soon, my name and my art began to resonate beyond the confines of our small Andalusian village. One day, I received a call from an art gallery in Seville. They had seen my work online and wanted to organize a solo exhibition. My heart pounded. It was a dream I never dared to vocalize. My parents, upon hearing the news, reacted with a mix of pride and nervousness. Antonio, more pragmatic, asked about the financial details. Carmen, for her part, worried about how I would dress for the opening. "Make sure your hair is presentable, Sofía," Carmen said with a tone that, for the first time, sounded more like advice than criticism. My curls, now my personal brand, were the center of attention. The exhibition in Seville was a resounding success. My paintings, vibrant and full of life, captured the essence of Andalusia and the strength of my story. Critics praised my unique style and my bold use of color. During the opening, a journalist asked me about the inspiration behind my self-portraits, where my curly hair was always the protagonist. I smiled, remembering my parents' mockery. "My hair," I replied, "is a symbol of my identity, of my resilience. It's what makes me unique, and what taught me to find my own voice." My words resonated in the room, and many nodded. The story of my hair, of my childhood mockery, and how it had become my greatest strength, was published in several newspapers and art magazines. I became an inspiring figure. My phone wouldn't stop ringing with interviews and proposals. Suddenly, the girl who used to hide from gazes had become a visible woman, admired for her art and her resilience. My parents, though proud, seemed overwhelmed by the attention. Antonio began to speak of my daughter, the famous artist, with a sparkle in his eyes. Carmen, for her part, looked at me with a new reverence. There was no longer any trace of mockery in their words or gestures. My hair, which was once a source of shame for them, was now a source of pride, a part of my identity that gave them prestige. Fame, though unexpected, did not change me. I remained Sofía, the village artist, with my untamed curls and my free spirit. But it gave me a platform to inspire others, to share my message of self-acceptance. I realized that the true victory was not fame, but the ability to transform pain into beauty, mockery into strength. My hair, my story, had become a beacon of hope. This chapter was the culmination of my journey, proof that authenticity, however different it may be, always finds its way into the light, and that the greatest strength is born from adversity. Despite the fame and success, a question kept lingering in my mind, the story of my hair. Why was it so different? Where did that coppery color, that untamed texture, come from? I felt the need to return to the origin. My adoptive parents had always been evasive about my biological past. "It was for the best, Sofía. There's nothing to know," Carmen would say, with a tone that closed any conversation. But my curiosity was insatiable. My hair had become a clue, a thread connecting me to my roots. I decided to hire a private investigator, someone who could help me unravel the mystery of my birth. The search was long and full of dead ends. The investigator told me that records were scarce, that my adoption had been very discreet. Melancholy returned, a sadness for the unknown. However, I did not give up. I felt deep within my being that my hair was more than a physical characteristic. It was a legacy, a message from my past. I wanted to understand it. I wanted to honor it. Meanwhile, I continued to paint, and my art became more introspective. My canvases reflected my search for identity, the connection between past and present. My hair remained my muse. One day, the investigator called me with news. He had found a small detail in my adoption papers, a name of a nearby, almost forgotten village in the mountains of Granada. A place called El Barranco. The name meant nothing to me, but intuition told me I had to go. My adoptive parents were reluctant. "It's not a good place, Sofía. It's better to let the past rest," Antonio insisted. But my determination was unwavering. I packed a small backpack, my sketchbooks and my brushes. My curls, now longer than ever, fell over my shoulders like a protective cloak. I arrived in El Barranco on a sunny day. It was an even smaller village than mine, hidden among ravines and olive trees. The houses were made of stone, and the air smelled of rosemary and earth. I walked through its narrow streets, feeling a strange familiarity. It was as if my feet had already trodden this ground before. My hair, under the sun, seemed to glow with its own light. I found a small craft shop, and upon entering, my eyes fell on some cloth dolls. They had curly hair, an intense coppery color, identical to mine. My heart skipped a beat. The shop owner, an old woman with wise eyes, looked at me with a smile. "You have the hair of the Rojos del Barranco," she said, with a soft voice. "It's a lineage of artists, of dream weavers." That phrase, the Rojos del Barranco, the Reds of the Ravine, resonated in my soul. It was the first time anyone had connected my hair to a story, to a legacy. It was the answer I had been searching for my whole life. The old woman from the shop, whose name was Dolores, told me the story of the Rojos del Barranco. It was a family of artisans and artists, known for their coppery hair and their skill in weaving unique tapestries and carpets. "Your hair is the mark of your lineage, Sofía," Dolores said, as I listened with fascination. "They created works of art with threads, and you, with your brushes, do the same." She showed me old tapestries, full of vibrant colors and intricate patterns. They were like my own paintings, but woven. I felt a deep connection, a sense of belonging I had never experienced. Dolores took me to the Rojos house, an old stone manor with a large loom in the courtyard. There, she introduced me to an older man, with graying hair but still visible curls. He was the last of the family. His name was Mateo, and his eyes widened when he saw me. "My sister's hair!" he exclaimed, with an emotion that moved me. He told me that his sister, my biological mother, had had to leave me due to difficult circumstances. He told me about my mother, a passionate and talented woman who painted with threads and dreamed of a more colorful world. He showed me old photos, and in one of them, I saw my mother young, with hair identical to mine. It was like looking into a mirror of the past. Melancholy mixed with immense joy. I had found my story, my origin, the explanation for my hair and my artistic soul. Matteo told me that my mother had been a free artist who didn't conform to norms, and that my hair, that very hair my adoptive parents mocked, was a symbol of that freedom and her lineage. I then understood Carmen and Antonio's mockery. It wasn't just about my hair, but about what it represented, a heritage, an identity they couldn't control that didn't fit into their world. I felt no anger, but a compassionate melancholy. They had tried to mold me out of love in their limited way. But that love, without freedom, had turned into a cage. I told them I forgave them, that I understood their motives. But I also told them that my path was my own, and that my hair, my art, my identity were my truth. The silence that followed was different. It was no longer the silence of disapproval, but of understanding. It was a silence laden with unsaid emotions, with regrets, and with a new acceptance. My hair, which had been the center of mockery, had become the bridge to truth. It had revealed not only my origin, but also the complexity of human intentions. This chapter was the final liberation. The truth, though painful for my parents, allowed us all to breathe. And for me, it gave me the peace of knowing who I was, where I came from, and where I was going. After the truth was revealed, the relationship with my adoptive parents began a slow process of healing. The tension dissipated, replaced by mutual acceptance, though still tinged with the melancholy of the past. I continued to visit El Barranco, learning from Matteo and immersing myself in the history of the Rojos del Barranco. My art flourished, and my exhibitions followed one after another, always with my curly hair as my distinctive mark. The people of the village, and now from all over Spain, knew me as Sofía, the artist with the fiery curls. My story, that of the misunderstood child who found her strength in her difference, became an inspiring legend. One day, while working in my studio, I received a letter from a law firm in Granada. It was an unexpected letter, with an official seal, asking me to appear for the reading of a will. My heart raced. A will? Whose? My adoptive parents knew nothing about it. I went to Granada alone, with a mix of curiosity and nervousness. At the law firm, the lawyer greeted me with professional seriousness. He informed me that the will belonged to a woman named Isabel Garcia, who had recently passed away with no known direct heirs. Ms. Garcia left a special clause in her will, the lawyer explained. She left her fortune and properties to the person who could prove a genetic link to her and who had a very particular physical characteristic, intensely coppery curly hair with a unique texture. My mind froze. Could it be? Isabel Garcia. The lawyer continued. Ms. Garcia was a textile artist, a tapestry weaver. Her family was known as the Rojos del Barranco. At that moment, the world stopped. Isabel Garcia was my biological grandfather's sister, Matteo's great-aunt. She was the last heiress of the oldest and wealthiest branch of my biological family, a branch that had prospered in the textile industry. My hair, that very hair my adoptive parents mocked, was not only my artistic inheritance but also the key to a fortune. The fortune of a woman who, like me, had celebrated her uniqueness. My adoptive parents' response, the mockery of my hairstyle, not only made me stronger and led me to my origin, but unknowingly guided me to a material legacy I never imagined. The irony was overwhelming. What they considered my greatest flaw, what they tried to suppress, had become the key to my total freedom, to a life of abundance and purpose. My life took an impactful turn. From being the girl with problematic curls in a small village, I became the heiress of an artistic and economic legacy, all thanks to the characteristic that made me unique. The melancholy of the past transformed into gratitude. Every mockery, every sigh of disapproval, had been one more step on the path to this revelation. My hair was my map, my destiny. Now, with my fortune, I was able to establish a foundation for young artists with unique talents, especially those who felt misunderstood. I wanted no one else to have to go through what I did. My story became a living testament. What makes you different is not a weakness, but your greatest power. And sometimes, The mockery of others is the push you need to discover your true worth. My curls, which were once my cross, became my crown, my legacy, and undeniable proof that life has surprising ways of rewarding authenticity.